Mark Raymundi from MMAfighting.com in Tokyo, Japan, with Garry Tonon ahead of his One Championship, a new era fight with Anthony Engelen on Sunday at Sumo Hall. Garry, first thing I want to ask you about is this outfit yesterday at the press conference. Now,
If you didn't bring it up, I was going to bring it up. So, yes, I went out to the press conference, and I decided to dress up like Wolverine. It was actually pretty funny because there's a couple people who were like, "Oh, did you try to dress up like Wolverine?" And after I got that question once or twice, I'm like, "Well, of course." So I just started messing with people, and I'm like, "Who's Wolverine?" I'm like, "What do you mean?" They're like, "Logan." I'm like, "What? Who's Logan?" Like just trying to pretend like I didn't know what they were talking about. But I've just been a huge fan of Wolverine ever since I was a kid. I think my first experiences were like I was playing like some X-Men Sega video game or something like that, and Wolverine could recover his health, and I just thought that was the coolest thing ever. And he's just kind of like that. He's one of those heroes he's a little bit more down to earth that I think people can relate to. I think some heroes are just a little bit too goody two shoes to be true, right? Like it's almost like a fantasy. You're like, all right, like when have you ever met somebody like that in your life? And it's like, okay, we can relate to Logan a little bit. He's got a little bit of a mean streak. Sometimes he's not the nicest guy in the world, right? He's not always like that. But at the end of the day, he's got a good heart and he tries to help people, right? So so I've always related very much to that character, and luckily I have features that kind of resemble him to a certain degree. So
did you kind of grow your hair out just for that?
Yeah. I also wanted to see how the bald spot would get covered by some longer hair. So we'll see how that goes. And I think it looks not terrible. I thought it was going to look terrible with longer hair, but it's not as bad as I thought.
Do you know why that bald spot appears?
Yeah. So it's alopecia. Basically, doctors don't study it at all and give you BS reasons about why it happens. Like, oh, yeah, you're stressed. It's like, well, yeah, I fight grown men in a cage for a living. What would you like me to do to change my stress levels? Like, oh, yeah, you could take some relaxing baths each night. Like, come on, let's get real. Like, that's scary, man. Like, of course I'm going to be stressed. So I don't really find that to be a real reason why it happens. They say it's like your immune system eating your hair follicles. You kind of deal with it by putting corticosteroid injections. I've done them a couple times. It kind of grew back a little bit. You can see little hairs in there, but I'm not too concerned. I was never the prettiest dude to begin with, and I don't really think I've ever gained any money or success or happiness from my looks really that much. So
don't sell yourself short, Garry.
I'm not too worried about it. Yeah.
Your opponent, Engelen, would you say he's the most dangerous opponent you fought so far in one?
Yeah, I've been telling people a lot that this opponent specifically more, and of course, like I always respect the opponents that are in front of me, but particularly this one because of the knockout power. I've been telling everybody, like, man, like this is the guy that I've feared the most, moving into to fighting him, just because the fight could be over at any moment. It's a really scary thing to think about. You look at the fight, I think it was Pettis versus Thompson that just recently happened, and everything's in Thompson's favor. Thompson, I think, he's better stand-up guy anyway. Just objectively, even without the weight, he was 2 weight classes above his opponent. I think he was beating him up first round. I didn't even get to see it, but I'm pretty sure he was doing really well. And then all of a sudden, one little jump off the cage, Superman punch, and that's it. Fight's over, right? That's a scary thing, man. To prepare, to do everything that you can to beat somebody, to actually be better than your opponent, and then you get caught with one strike, and then it's done, right? So that really puts a lot of fear in me that this guy can just kick me in the head and it's over,
Is it a fear of the finality of the fight, or is it a fear of the potential injury of a knockout?
Yeah, good question. I'm not really afraid of the potential injury of the knockout. I mean, to a degree, I am. I don't think getting many concussions in your life is a good thing. But, I mean, it's a part of the sport. I have to recognize that. Sure, that's an issue. But more so, I think what comes to mind initially, because that's more of a long-term thing, what comes to the mind initially is more like, being in front of thousands of people, and kind of, in a way, it's embarrassing, to lose like that. I don't look at that situation and say, like, oh, that guy should be embarrassed. But being in that situation, like, I would feel that way, because you prepare so hard. I have family members that fly out all the way to Japan to come watch this. I have tons of people that are big fans that are watching and everything like that. And to have a fight end like that, it would be hard for me not to be embarrassed in a way. Not that I think I should be. You understand what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah.
I don't find anything. There's nothing wrong with losing, and there's nothing wrong with getting knocked out. It's just, man, that would be disappointing after all this work. So that's more along the lines of what I fear as far as that's concerned than the actual brain trauma of the knockout. Perhaps that's just because I'm dumb, but I don't know.
John Jones has actually said that one of his greatest motivations is not becoming a meme, not getting knocked out and becoming a meme.
No, well, that's true. That's the fear, right? Like, because that's kind of what that you got to live with every day, right? That picture of you with foam coming into your mouth, getting strangled unconscious, or that picture of you with your head lands on the mat in a weird way, or whatever the case may be, and that's forever, right? Like, it never really goes away. Like, sure, you could win your next fight, but it's out there, man. Anybody can go back and look at that and watch that, or bring it up, or bring back a play-by-play. And it's happened to me in grappling matches before. Remember, I got flying triangled by this dude named Antonio Carlos Jr. And man, that was embarrassing. Yeah, guy jumps in the air and triangles you in the first minute of a match. Man, that sucks. So yeah, that's the knockout. Like, you can recover from. Of course, there's long-term consequences, but that's there forever.
So as far as obviously you're a high level grappler and now you're doing MMA, and it feels like in your initial fights with one, you were trying to show that, hey, I'm not just a grappler. You stood up a lot for a lot of those fights,
Sure.
and you did well. You did great.
Yeah.
Is that something that you want to continue, or do you think at some point, as the level of opposition gets harder, you're gonna have to go back to that bread and butter and be that great grappler that you are?
Something that everybody should understand is that I've been doing jiu-jitsu for 10 years. So naturally, when the cards are down, or when the chips are down, whatever you want to say, and things are not going well, I'm always going to go back to grappling. And it's not going to be a choice. It's just going to be something that I do. This is instinct. It's habits that I've developed for 10 years. There's no way I could overpower instincts that I've developed for 10 years compared to something that I've only really been doing for a little over a year. So will that happen at certain points when tough fights are in front of me? Absolutely. I will be going back to grappling. However, I think that the more important thing is not so much like, am I going to be doing the rest of my fights playing around with the striking element or trying to prove something from the striking element? That's not really the important thing to think about as far as I'm concerned. That's not really where my head is at. Where my head was at for those first few fights is, yeah, I do want to be in that standing position because I got to feel it. I felt it. Okay, I get it. I know what the standing position is like. Have I done it at the highest level yet? No, but I get the idea. I get punched in the head. I get kicked in the head. I try to avoid it, and then I try to do that to the other guy. I get the rough idea, right? But the more important thing I think to look at from my perspective with my type of game is that I never want to rush that game plan of trying to go in and grapple and submit someone. The idea is to try to, as safely and efficiently as possible, get the fight to the ground. So what that means is typically not just diving for a double leg with my head exposed in the first 2 seconds of the fight. I don't think that's what you're going to see me do, no matter how high level the opponent is. As the level of the opponents increase, it becomes even more important for me to be creatively setting up those opportunities for taking guys down. Will you see me, when I deal with more and more dangerous opponents, more quickly, perhaps, get someone to the floor and try to control things? Sure. But it won't be rushed. It's not going to be something that, or it shouldn't be rushed, at least from my perspective. That's the way that I want to try to make sure that I don't do things. I want to make sure that I'm still recognizing in my relative safety in the standing position and setting things up with creativity and efficiency when it comes to striking. So there will still be striking in almost all of my fights. It's not like it's always going to be just a grappling match.
Two-part question. You're someone at your level of grappling, you're so good at it that you could make a living probably just grappling, doing seminars, probably,
Much more easily, actually.
Exactly, much more easier, and that's my question. Why MMA, where you have the risk of head trauma, et cetera, and with that said, what are your goals in MMA? Because obviously you're doing this for a reason.
Yeah, as you said, competing and continuing to compete in grappling would have probably been the easier road for me. As far as the rest of my life is concerned, I could have pretty easily just made the rest of my living on that and lived a pretty wealthy and happy life. I don't need much. Like, I'm not the kind of guy that like needs super expensive stuff. Every once in a while I splurge and treat yourself, you know. But but it's not like I don't live that kind of lifestyle. I'm perfectly happy in my dirty little crappy apartment for $1,100 a month. Like that keeps me happy. Do I want success and things like that in the future more so than I have now? Yeah, I think it's important to always strive for more. But it's not something that monetarily, like the monetary incentive of MMA is not really that's not my motivation, if you will. Sure, it's cool. Like for sure, if I'm successful in MMA, which I believe I will be, I will make a lot more money than I would have if I just continued to teach seminars and grapple and things, even though I could have made a very comfortable living. However, what really drives me to continue to do that is my main motivation, which is to teach. In the future, I'd like to be a great teacher. And I believe that by fighting, it will give me a better base of knowledge for all martial arts as opposed to just jiu-jitsu. So that when somebody comes to me and says, hey, Gary, not only do I like to learn jiu-jitsu, I'd also like to fight one day, I can actually give them some experiential knowledge. And I don't have to just say, well, I think this will work. I think I've seen this guy do this. I think, it's good. It's good to watch other people do things, but it's also really good to just test the waters yourself. And now I can say, like, listen, man, I got in there. I tried to do that. Good idea. I got in there. I tried to do that. Bad idea, right? And I think I'll be able to better help people in the future with that kind of knowledge. So that's my main incentive, I would say, for doing MMA. I think a lot of people think it's a weird incentive. Some people have told me, like, oh, that's not good enough. Like, it's not a good enough reason, but to me, it's a better reason than like seeking monetary compensation or anything like that. Like, do I want
You have to have some individual goals too, though.
Sure. Do I want to be the best mixed martial artist in the world? Sure. But in pursuit of that, I'm also going to become a better teacher, I believe. At least if I focus on doing that. That's what I'm looking forward to, is just getting this experience out of the way. Because, at the end of the day, like, fighting is not forever. Nobody can do it forever. Like, George just retired. George St. Pierre, best in the planet. And he had a very long career, really long career. I think he started fighting before his 20s, maybe, like as a teenager, and then all the way through. I think he's probably like mid-30s now. That's a long career, man. I don't even think I'm going to have that long of a career as a mixed martial artist because I started so much later. But as a teacher, like, you could teach forever for the most part. Until your body completely gives out. I'd imagine I'll be teaching till I'm, in my 70s, maybe 80. If I'm lucky, I don't know. Hopefully, I'm dead by 80. But, no. The way I live life, I'm sure, with the way I eat. But yeah, man. That's what I think I'm going to be doing with the rest of my life. So I'm always someone who looks forward to the future, and looks to what I'm doing now is going to accomplish A, B, and C down the road, and that's kind of the way that I look at MMA.
So you fought now. This is your third weight class in one. You fought at welterweight, lightweight, now featherweight, and a little bit different in one than it is in the States. So featherweight is 155 here, correct? So you had to, I guess, before I start making.
I never fought at welterweight here. Just lightweight here. Lightweight is 170.
170, okay.
Sorry. I wanted to clarify.
No, that's why I asked, because there's some confusion, I guess, for people in the States who kind of have the, what the UFC weight class numbers are.
It's extremely confusing. It's one thing to change it's one thing to I guess, I don't know, man, like, it was weird to change the names of the weight divisions, because now that adds to the confusion, because then when people hear lightweight, they are always associating it with 155, and now it means 170. It just makes things super confusing. I get why they do it, because I certainly would never be fighting 170 in an organization that had weight cutting rules like this. Like, that would be crazy. 170 there's dudes that fight 170 in the UFC are well over 200 pounds. I'm nowhere near that. Even fighting 155 realistically in this organization, I wouldn't. If I was fighting in the UFC or any other organization, I certainly wouldn't be fighting 155. There's some guys over 200 pounds at 55, believe it or not. I think Khabib, I'm pretty sure he pushes 200. So, yeah, the equivalency of the weight classes are a little tricky because the weigh-in differences are so strong. Like, I think the max you can really cut for these fights is like maybe 10 pounds.
Like a water cut, you mean?
Like like you maybe get rid of like 10 pounds of water, maybe, and that's tough. Like it's real tough because you gotta be hydrated when they test your urine.
Right.
So you can only really like, let's say for a UFC weigh-in, right? You could take 24 hours to cut 30 pounds of water or whatever. You would never pass a hydration test like that. So it's cool in the sense that I know that when I stand in front of the person that I'm going to be fighting, they're not going to be like 40 pounds heavier than me. You know, that would be absurd. So that's kind of cool.
So I want to ask you about these hydration tests. So they start like what, 3 days out of the fight?
2 days before the fight
2 days
is
before
your
the
first weight cut or weigh-in and hydration. Then 1 day before you have to make another one. So you have to actually do it twice, which is another way to kind of stop people from cutting obscene amounts of weight. Because let's say you found a system and you could do 15 pounds. 15 pounds, you're going to have to do that 2 days in a row. You're going to have to make that weight cut.
Right.
Like that's going to be really hard on your body. So I think it's another incentive kind of to like scale back and do a weight that's a lot closer to your real body weight. I mean, and the truth is that if I wanted to, I could be 155 pounds with no weight cut whatsoever. It's just like not smart to do it that way, right? Like you try to have some weight advantage, right? So, I cut some weight, but I could be 155. It wouldn't be the most comfortable thing in the world, especially because I like to eat. But I could do it. Whereas like Khabib could never be 155 and fight. It's just unrealistic. It's just never going to happen. So, that's pretty much how it works. You got to make 2 hydration tests, 2 weigh-ins, and if you fail either one of them on either day, it doesn't make a difference. You have to weigh in the day before the fight, the day of the fight. My apologies, at like 9 a.m. So that's another big incentive to like not screw up, because you screw up one of those now, like, dude, 9 a.m. the day of your fight, you got to make weight. Like, that's rough.
So I believe you missed your hydration test today, right? You were off your hydration test today?
No, I passed. I was late, but I passed.
So if you were to have missed, then you have to come the day of the fight and then weigh in.
Yeah.
And at what weight? So it has to be
Still same thing. Same thing. You'd have to pass. There's no getting around making weight and hydration. You have to they test both. And it's not like they test the hydration and then you weigh in. You can weigh in whenever you want. It's like back to back. So there's no opportunity to cut weight after you make the hydration.
One last question on that, because again, I think a lot of people in the States who are used to the UFC system don't really understand. How do you know that your opponent is doing the same thing? Do you get to watch your opponent weigh in? Because in these states, like, they have the commission and the scale is right there in front of everyone, whereas there's no public weigh-in here.
I don't. It's not something that you like get to bring media to. Nobody films it or anything like that. But I mean, I trust the organization. I work with these guys. I'm pretty happy with them. And based on the size of my relative opponent, like, I would say that he's probably making weight. When I was fighting 170, I just didn't know how to cut weight for this organization. Like, I didn't know that you could cut any weight at all. Like, I didn't really understand how the hydration test worked. So yeah, I had an opponent when I fought Rahul Raju that was a little bit bigger than me. But I believe he was fighting within the rules of the organization. I don't think anybody like pushed him through. I think he definitely made weight. I think it was realistic for him to make weight. But I mean, no, there's nobody filming it for me to see my opponent weighing in. But I mean, just based on the size of my opponent, I'm pretty confident that he's doing the same thing that I would have to do. So I don't know, I'm pretty comfortable with it. Doesn't upset me.
Do you think, and you've had teammates who obviously have...
Sorry if I'm out of frame.
You're fine. Teammates who fought in the UFC and have fought in the States, and Chatri Sejitong, the one chairman, is all about kind of, he said, building heroes, not promoting fights,
Sure.
and the pure martial arts. And he said, he told me the other day that he feels like the West has tainted what mixed martial arts should be. Do you agree with that?
To a degree, man. I think it's a different model. It definitely is it would be hard to argue that it's not a successful model, right? Because they've had a lot of success doing the things that they're doing, and Chatri's having a lot of success.
Having a lot of success.
Yeah,
A lot of
success doing the things that he's doing, right? And so I think there are two different ways to go about things, right? And then what it comes down to is, what kind of concessions are you willing to make as far as your character is concerned, right? Like, for instance, let's put it this way. I could make $100 working all day, and I could make $100 by stealing it from a 7-Eleven. Both would work. I would have $100 in my pocket, right? But am I willing to concede to the notion that I'm stealing from someone else? I'm doing wrong to someone, right? So what I would say is that it's definitely, as far as the way that Chatri is doing things and the way that One Championship is doing things, there's no concession of honor or pride or respect or anything like that in the way that they're successful. And I think that many of the ways that the UFC is successful, they have thrown that kind of thing out the window. They're like, who cares? Like, we're worried about what people are going to click on, what people are going to watch. We've thrown away the idea of caring about whether or not it's respectful or, it shows any type of martial arts value or anything like that. So in that regard, yes, I would definitely say that. But again,
So UFC is stealing from 7-Eleven.
yes, exactly. UFC is stealing from 7-Eleven, exactly. In the analogy I chose to use, but it might be a little bit of a harsh analogy, but I think it gets the point across, right?
Thanks, Gary. I appreciate it, man.
Yeah,
Good
no
luck
problem.
today.
Thank you.